Last summer, I stood in my garden holding 2 tomatoes from the same variety, planted the same day, in the same soil, and one was nearly twice the size of the other. Same seeds, same compost, same sunlight. The only difference was how I watered them. And honestly, when I saw the results, I just stood there for a minute thinking about all the years I'd been doing it wrong. Not a little wrong, fundamentally wrong. I tested 5 completely different watering schedules across 5 identical raised beds for an entire growing season. One of those schedules produced fruit so much larger and so much more flavorful that it made the other 4 look like they'd been struggling the whole time. And today, I'm going to show you exactly what I did, exactly what I measured, and exactly which schedule won. I've been growing food for over 15 years. And for most of that time, I thought watering was the simplest part of the whole operation. I mean, you grab the hose, you soak the bed, you move on with your day. That was my routine. I spent years obsessing over soil amendments, companion planting, pest control, seed varieties, all the stuff that feels like it matters most. And watering? Watering was just background noise, something I did on autopilot. Then about 3 years ago, I had a season where half my garden underperformed badly. Tomatoes cracked. Peppers stayed small. My squash vines looked lush but barely produced anything worth picking. I went down a rabbit hole trying to figure out what went wrong, tested my soil, checked for disease, even sent leaf samples to a lab. Everything came back fine. A friend of mine, a guy named Ray who's been farming commercially for decades, looked at my setup and asked me one question. "How are you watering?" I told him. "Every day, about 20 minutes with the hose in the morning." He just shook his head and said, "That's your whole problem right there." That conversation changed everything for me. It sent me down a path of research that eventually led to the experiment I ran last year. And the results were not what I expected. Here's the thing most gardening advice gets completely wrong about watering. They give you a single rule and tell you it works for everything. Water deeply once a week, or water every day, or water when the top inch of soil is dry. You've heard all of these, and they're not necessarily bad advice in isolation, but they ignore something critical. Your plants don't need the same amount of water at every stage of growth. A tomato seedling that just went into the ground has completely different needs than a tomato plant that's loaded with green fruit trying to ripen. And yet, most of us water the same way from transplant day all the way through harvest. Think about that for a second. We change our fertilizer through the season. We prune differently as the plant matures. We adjust for temperature and sunlight. But watering? We just keep doing the same thing. And it's costing us. Big time. The other problem is that the gardening industry doesn't really have any incentive to teach you how to water properly. There's no product to sell you. Nobody's making money off a watering schedule. But they will sell you bigger pots, more fertilizer, growth stimulants, calcium sprays for blossom end rot. Which, by the way, is almost always a watering problem, not a calcium problem. I spent years buying calcium supplements for my tomatoes when the real issue was inconsistent moisture at the root zone. That's money I didn't need to spend on a problem I didn't actually have. And I know I'm not the only one. The real cost of bad watering isn't just smaller fruit. It's cracked tomatoes from sudden moisture swings. It's blossom drop on peppers because the roots were stressed. It's fungal problems from watering at the wrong time of day. It's shallow root systems that make your plants dependent on you instead of resilient on their own. All of these problems, Trace back to how and when you water. So last spring, I decided to stop guessing and actually run a controlled test across 5 identical raised beds. Each bed was 4 feet by 8 feet, filled with the same mix: equal parts compost, topsoil, with an aged leaf mulch. I planted the same variety of tomato in each bed, Cherokee Purple, 6 plants per bed, all started from the same seed packet, same transplant date, same mulch layer, 3 inches of straw on every bed, same exposure, full south-facing sun. The only variable was the watering schedule. Bed 1 got what I call the daily light schedule, a gentle watering every single morning, about half a gallon per plant. Bed 2 got the deep soak method. She's a heavy watering twice a week, roughly 2 gallons per plant each time. Bed 3 got the every other day schedule, 1 gallon per plant, every 48 hours, first thing in the morning. Bed 4, this is the one that changed my thinking, got what I'm calling the staged schedule. And I'll break that down in detail in a minute because it's the one that won, and it's the one you need to understand. Bed 5 got what a lot of people online recommend: water only when the soil is dry 2 inches down. So I checked every morning with my finger and only watered when it felt dry at that depth. No set schedule at all. Let me walk you through exactly how I set this up, because the details matter more than you'd think. First, consistency. I used the same watering can for every bed so I could measure precisely. No hose, no drip line, no sprinkler. Just a 2-gallon watering can with a rain head attachment, so the water spread gently over the root zone. I watered at the base of each plant, never over the leaves, every single time. Second, I kept a journal. Every morning I recorded which bed got water, how much, what the soil looked like, and the temperature. I also noted the first flower, first fruit set, first ripe fruit, and any problems like cracking or blossom end rot. I know that sounds obsessive and, yeah, it kind of was. But if you're going to test something, test it right. Now let me tell you about Bed 4, the staged schedule, because this is where it gets really interesting. The staged schedule breaks the growing season into 3 phases. Phase 1 is establishment. That's the first 3 weeks after transplant. During this phase, I watered every single day, about 3/4 of a gallon per plant. The goal here is to keep the root zone consistently moist. Not soggy, not saturated, just evenly damp. You want those roots to settle in and start spreading without any stress. Most people either overwater during this phase and drown the roots or underwater and stress the transplant. The key is moderate daily consistency. Phase 2 starts around week 4 and goes until the plant is loaded with green fruit. This is the vegetative growth and flowering phase. During this window, I dropped to every 3rd day, but increased the volume to about 1.5 gallons per plant. The idea is to push the roots deeper. When you water less frequently, but with more volume, the moisture sinks down and the roots chase it. You're training the root system to go deep instead of staying shallow near the surface. And deeper roots mean a more resilient plant that can handle heat and dry spells without wilting. I noticed by week 6, the Bed 4 plants had noticeably thicker stems and darker foliage than any other bed. They just looked stronger. Now here's where most people make a critical mistake. When the fruit starts forming, they keep watering the same way. But phase 3, the fruiting and ripening phase, requires a shift. Once I had golf ball-sized green fruit on the vines, I changed again. I went to every other day, but pulled the volume back to about 1 gallon per plant. And here's the crucial part. I kept that rhythm absolutely consistent. No skipping days, No extra watering after a hot afternoon. Want no panic soaking when the leaves looked a little droopy at 2 in the afternoon, which, by the way, is totally normal for tomatoes in summer heat. They perk right back up by evening. The consistency during this phase is everything. Fruit size and flavor are largely determined by steady, predictable moisture during ripening. Big swings, dry, then soaked, then dry. That's what causes cracking. That's what causes mealy texture. That's what produces those bland, watery tomatoes that make you wonder why you even bother growing them. I also want to mention something about bed 1, the daily light watering. A lot of people water this way. A little bit every day, kind of like a daily check-in, and it seems like it should work. But what I observed was that the water never really penetrated deep enough. The top 3 inches of soil stayed damp, but below that it was dry. The roots stayed shallow. The plants looked okay. Decent foliage, reasonable flowering, but the fruit stayed small, and the plants were the first to wilt on hot days. They had no deep root reserves to draw from. They were completely dependent on that daily surface watering. Bed 2, the deep soak twice a week, had the opposite problem. The plants went through boom and bust cycles. Right after watering, they looked amazing. By day 3, they were showing stress. The fruit had the most cracking of any bed, so 3 of the 6 plants developed mild blossom end rot in July. The inconsistency was just too much. Bed 3, every other day, actually performed pretty well. It was my second best bed. The plants were healthy, the fruit was decent-sized, and I had very little cracking. But the fruit still wasn't as large or flavorful as bed 4. The difference was that bed 3 used the same approach all season long. It never adapted to what the plant actually needed at each stage. And bed 5, the water when dry method, was honestly the most frustrating. Some weeks I'd water 3 days in a row. Other weeks I'd go 4 days without watering. There was no rhythm to it, and I think the plants could feel that. The fruit was inconsistent. Some big, some small, some cracked, some fine. It was the most unpredictable bed of all. By mid-August, the differences between these 5 beds were impossible to ignore. Bed 4, the staged schedule, produced Cherokee purples that averaged 14 ounces per fruit. Bed 3, my second best, averaged about 9 ounces. Beds 1, 2, and 5 ranged between 6 and 8 ounces. That's nearly double the fruit size from the same variety, the same soil, the same sun. Just a different watering approach. But it wasn't just size. The bed 4 tomatoes tasted better. Richer, more complex. That deep, almost wine-like sweetness that Cherokee purples are known for, it was dramatically more pronounced. My neighbor Patricia tried one and asked me what variety it was, because she didn't believe it was the same tomato she'd been growing for years. The plants themselves were more productive too. Bed 4 gave me an average of 22 pounds of fruit per plant over the season. Bed 3 gave me about 16. The others ranged from 11 to 14. And here's something that really surprised me. Bed 4 also had the least disease pressure. No blossom end rot, no cracking, very little leaf spot. I think the consistent deep root system just made healthier, more resilient plants overall. And the cost of all this? 0. Not $1 extra. No special product. No fancy irrigation system. Just a different rhythm. Here's what I want you to do. Pick just 1 bed or 1 row in your garden this season and try the staged schedule. 3 phases. Daily and moderate for the first 3 weeks. Every 3rd day with more volume during vegetative growth. Then every other day, steady and consistent, once the fruit sets. Keep a simple journal, even just notes on your phone. Track what you see. I think you're going to be genuinely surprised by the difference, and I'd love to hear about it. Tell me in the comments what you're growing and what results you see after your first season with this approach. Shuka, if you've been dealing with cracking tomatoes or blossom end rot, I've got another video that goes deeper into those specific problems and how to solve them for good. And if you want to learn more about building the kind of soil that holds moisture evenly and feeds your plants at the same time, I've covered that too. This is the kind of knowledge that changes how you grow, not by spending more, not by buying more, but by paying attention to what your plants are actually telling you. The water is already in your hose. The schedule is in your hands now. Go try it.